Unforeseen intervention. As Hannes ran with Eren and Mikasa in his arms, a stranger emerged from the shadows, walking past the startled soldier. His surprise evident, Hannes cried out to the newcomer, "Hey! Run away!" His voice filled with urgency as he continued his frantic escape. However, the stranger paid Hannes no heed and moved forward calmly and purposefully. Hannes came to a stop, looking back in astonishment. Even Eren and Mikasa halted their resistance, their curious gazes fixed on the unfolding scene. Kaito walked toward the approaching Titan, which loomed ominously near the house where Carla lay trapped. The mother, resigned to her fate, had closed her eyes as she reminisced about happier times. However, she heard footsteps approaching her beside the colossal Titan. "Eren, go," she managed to utter before she opened her eyes to see a man, quite young, standing before her. Her voice quivered as she implored, "Run away." Inwardly frustrated by her kind-heartedness, Kaito knelt beside her, meeting her gaze. Do you want to live?" he asked. The question took Carla aback, but after a moment's pause, she shook her head. "Leave me, my legs are broken. Run away. That thing is coming." Kaito couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and exasperation. Shaking his head, he offered her a small smile and said, "I'll take that as a yes." Dumbfounded by the boy's fearlessness in the face of danger, Carla could hardly believe her eyes. The colossal shadow of the approaching Titan loomed over her, its eerie gaze fixed on the scene. The Titan extended its hand toward Carla, ignoring Kaito entirely. Carla closed her eyes, awaiting her inevitable fate. Eren, Mikasa. Live well. But the crushing hand of the Titan never arrived. Instead, what greeted her eyes was the sight of the boy's small hand holding the Titan's enormous hand just a meter away from her. Kaito looked into the Titan's eyes and spat out a joint he had been smoking. "Ignoring such a sexy boy in front of you, babe," he remarked with a cheeky smile. Carla couldn't believe what was happening. Did the creature suddenly have a change of mind? If the Titan possessed the capacity for shock, its wide-eyed expression would have mirrored disbelief at the sight of the seemingly insignificant human holding its colossal hand. Yet, it was devoid of thought, acting on instinct alone. The Titan raised its other hand with the intention of swatting the small, defiant intruder. Kaito, undeterred, stood his ground. He had no intention of yielding, for to do so would mean the end of Carla and possibly himself. Just as the Titan's massive hand descended upon them, Kaito raised his other hand, intercepting the colossal limb with a force that halted it in its tracks. Whoosh! With a rush of wind and a moment of sheer audacity, Kaito seized the Titan's hand and spoke with a cool confidence, "Meet my special Titan Summer Slam." Gripping the Titan's hand, his fingers dug into its flesh, and he pulled with remarkable strength, causing the Titan to stagger forward, propelled by the unstoppable force. As the creature's falling speed increased, Kaito shifted his grip and raised the gigantic Titan high into the air. Boom! Then, with an earth-shaking crash that sent dust and winds blasting in every direction, he slammed the Titan down behind him. The sheer impact of this move unleashed a maelstrom of destruction, obscuring vision in a cloud of chaos. Eren's point of view. Eren watched in disbelief as his mother, Carla, lay trapped beneath the rubble. Her words, urging him to save himself and Mikasa, were drowned out by the roar of the approaching smiling Titan. He clung to Hannes, who was carrying him and Mikasa away from the nightmarish scene. Panic and despair welled up inside him. "Mikasa, we have to help Mom," Eren cried out. Mikasa's eyes were filled with tears, and she looked back at their mother, but Hannes pulled him forcefully away. "We can't, Eren. Your mother wants us to survive." Eren's heart ached at the sound of his mother's voice, filled with pain and desperation. He knew her words were a mother's sacrifice, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. Just as they retreated, a stranger emerged, calmly walking toward the colossal Titan. Eren's mind raced with confusion and curiosity. Who was this newcomer, and what did he intend to do? The smiling Titan loomed closer, and the tension in the air was suffocating. Eren stopped resisting as Hannes carried him away, his eyes fixed on the unfolding spectacle. The stranger and the Titan were now face to face, and the impending clash seemed inevitable. Who was that guy? Eren mumbled to himself, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and wonder. Then, with a sudden and unexplainable burst of power, the stranger intervened. He grasped the Titan's colossal hand and halted its deadly descent. Eren's eyes widened in disbelief. The stranger, undeterred, exchanged taunting words with the Titan. The standoff continued, and Eren couldn't tear his gaze away from the miraculous scene. "Meet my special Titan Summer Slam," the stranger said with a cheeky grin. The next thing they saw was the big Titan stumbling forward, and a second later, an upside-down Titan flying through the skies before falling. The maelstrom of dust blocked their vision, and all three of them remained frozen like statues. What the heck? Eren heard Hannes mumble, but his mind was still on the storm of dust. With a newfound determination, Eren remembered his mother, who could be somewhere in the midst of the chaos. Taking advantage of Hannes' momentary inattention, he broke free from his arms and ran toward his house, leaving behind a cry from Hannes that he couldn't afford to heed. His heart pounded in his chest as he raced toward the wreckage, praying that somehow, amidst the destruction and despair, he would find his mother safe and sound. Story intensifies. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra creators' thoughts. 9 comments 0 vote. Eclipsed by oddities, shrouded in despair. After slamming the Titan to the ground, Kaito's body took a surreal turn. In his left hand that had blocked the Titan's second blow, skin lost its supple texture, turning pallid and mottled, and his fingers seemed to shrivel, as paper out in rain. His hands started rotting and taking a black texture with raid pace. With a quick chop from his left hand on his shoulder, the right hand was decapitated. "TCH, useless body," he muttered as he severed the decaying limb. In a matter of seconds, rapid cell division ensued, knitting bone, flesh and sinew back together. Arteries and veins sprung back to life, supplying nourishment to regenerating tissue. Nerves ignited with a strange, tingling sensation that Kaito couldn't help but say, "Talk about handy." He shook it as it grew, commenting with a hint of nonchalance, "Never gets old, does it?" His question was directed at Carla, who had been staring at the downed Titan with a gaping mouth. Kaito's sudden query jolted her out of her daze, making her look at the seemingly ordinary boy, whose arm was regenerating at a rapid pace. Instinctively, fear gripped her, and she stammered, What W was that? W who or YYOU? Her tone was fraught with fear of the unknown. Ignoring her, Kaito redirected his attention toward the smiling Titan, which lay with its back on the earth, seemingly uninjured. Its eerie eyes watched him as it attempted to rise. Kaito wasn't about to let that happen. Not so fast, he declared with determination, making a quick, almost superhuman jump. He landed on the Titan's chest, just as it tried to bite him by bending its massive head. With one hand, he held the Titan's chin at bay. Leaning down, he lowered his mouth toward the Titan's colossal neck. "Farewell, Diana. Your death won't be remembered," Kaito whispered as his canines grew, and he plunged them into the Titan's neck. Carla could only watch in shock and horror as Kaito displayed abilities that defied all reason. The mysterious boy's actions and words left her trembling, for she had just witnessed something far beyond the realm of ordinary human capabilities. In a matter of moments, the massive body of the smiling Titan began to shrink and wither, as though a balloon had been deflated. The once fearsome Titan thrashed weakly, but its body had grown so feeble that it started to break apart. Slowly, the Titan's face melted off, leaving behind a gooey liquid, while the rest of its colossal form evaporated into the air, similar to what occurred when Titans met their demise. Carla could only watch this surreal scene with wide, disbelieving eyes. Her mind struggled to comprehend the impossible, and a part of her wondered if she had already crossed over into the realm of the afterlife. The world she once knew had been upended, and nothing seemed certain anymore. Strangely, she had forgotten that she was in pain, her previous suffering fading into the background. As for the boy who had saved her, his strange transformation continued. His white hair began to change, strand by strand, into pale golden hues. In the end, his hair remained a striking mix of golden and white strands. With a fluid grace, he rose to his feet, and Carla couldn't help but notice that his whole body was naked. Eek! Carla's startled cry filled the air as she quickly closed her eyes. However, not before her gaze inadvertently took a swift, curious glance at his chiseled body. Carla's startled cry had attracted Kaito's attention, and he quickly turned to see her condition. Her face had grown pale, a sign of severe blood loss. Without hesitation, he leapt beside Carla, his voice urgent as he patted her closed-eyed face. "Hey! You there!" Carla had closed her eyes in response to her embarrassment and fear, but the touch on her cheeks was impossible to ignore. She clenched her eyes even tighter shut, her heart pounding in her chest. Seeing her reaction, Kaito realized she was conscious, at least for now. With a chilling matter-of-factness in his voice, he said, "You will die, soon." Carla's eyes shot open, filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. She didn't understand this boy or the strange, extraordinary events that had unfolded before her. All she knew was that her life hung in the balance, and the enigmatic figure who had saved her seemed to possess knowledge and powers beyond her comprehension. Die. Carla stammered, her voice trembling with a fear she thought she had already accepted. She had initially resigned herself to death, believing it was for the sake of her beloved children, Eren and Mikasa. But now, as she lay amidst the aftermath of unimaginable events, a surge of terror overcame her. She was but a woman, and the series of horrifying experiences she had endured had rekindled the fear of death she had tried to bury. Kaito's words cut through her like a chilling blade. Yes, you have lost too much blood, he explained, confirming the grim reality. Carla's eyes darted around her surroundings, and she suddenly realized that half of her body was trapped beneath a massive wooden beam. Yet, curiously, she felt no pain or discomfort. The realization of her dire situation and the impending finality of her fate washed over her like a cold wave. Tears spilled from the corners of her eyes as she closed them in resignation. She could only hope that her children, Eren and Mikasa, would find a way to survive and thrive in the midst of the chaos that had descended upon their world. With astonishing ease, Kaito pushed aside the massive wooden beam that Eren and Mikasa had struggled to move earlier. The reveal was nothing short of horrific. Carla's lower body lay crushed and twisted beneath the weight of the debris, a sight that was far from treatable. Her eyes were about to drift down to the gruesome injury when Kaito gently closed them. Better you don't see, he murmured as he felt her trembling and the tears flowing over his hand. He asked her again, I will ask you once more, do you want to live? Carla's response was filled with a resigned smile. Does that matter what I wish? Just one wish. If you can, please tell my son I love him. Kaito couldn't help but curse under his breath. In a swift and unexpected motion, he wrapped his hand around Carla's waist, lifting her and hanging her over his shoulder. The abruptness of the situation left Carla shocked and breathless, making her gasp audibly. Soon after, she fainted. As Kaito prepared to make a leap, he heard a voice coming from some distance away. Mom. Kaito turned his head and spotted a young Eren running toward them. With a malevolent smirk and a hand gesture that symbolized beheading, Kaito took a step back and vanished in the bowl of dust and smoke that had covered the area, leaving behind Eren who looked at him with bloodshot eyes. Eren's eyes were fixated on the spot where Kaito had been just moments ago. Desperation and anger consumed him as he ran toward the empty space where the mysterious boy had vanished, but there was no trace of him, except for a chilling pool of blood that marked the place where his mother had been struck. A single tear welled up in Eren's eye and fell to the ground, a silent testament to the pain and confusion he was experiencing. He had been mere moments away from a reunion with his mother, and now she was gone. A moment later, Hannes and Mikasa arrived, running through the dissipating smoke. Hannes gazed incredulously at the scene, his eyes filled with disbelief and concern. Beside him, Mikasa watched Eren with a deep sense of worry, her own tears flowing freely. She discreetly wiped her tears on the red scarf she always wore, a symbol of her strength and determination in the face of adversity, but her concern for Eren was evident in her eyes. Hannes, his sense of urgency intensifying, spotted more Titans looming in the distance. He turned to Eren and Mikasa, his voice filled with urgency. Eren, Mikasa, we must go now. Without waiting for their responses, he grabbed their hands and began to run toward the inner gate of Shiganshina. The looming threat of the Titans left no room for hesitation. Poor Carla just can't catch a break. Your comment is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. NightSpectra creators' thoughts. 8 comments 0 vote.